All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's event, Why Board Service Should Be in Your Future and How to Get Started. I am Courtney Skinner, Simon's new Executive Director of Advancement and Alumni, and I'd like to thank you for joining us. Before we begin, I'd like to extend a special thanks to the Simon Women's Alliance and the Bennett Career Management Center for hosting this webinar. For those of you who are not yet members or are just learning about this terrific group, the Simon Women's Alliance is a tremendous organization that provides meaningful, ongoing, growth-oriented opportunities for Simon alumni to link up, benefit from the experiences of a diverse group of women who are at all stages of their lives and careers, and find camaraderie as well as learning. The SWA is also meaningfully paying it forward to current and future Simon students by raising scholarship funds, and are proud to support one student per full-time MBA class, a really terrific thing. This event is also co-sponsored by the University of Rochester Women's Network, a volunteer-led group guided by the mission to harness and celebrate the rich contributions of women around the world who are part of the UR family. Without further ado, I am very pleased to turn things over to our moderator, Nithya Ruff. I hope you all had an opportunity to read her very impressive bio. Just a few quick highlights. Nithya is head of Comcast's Open Source Program Office and the chair of the Linux Foundation Board. She is a graduate of our MBA program, an active Simon Women's Alliance member, and a great partner to the Bennett CMC. So with that, Nithya.
Courtney, thank you so much and welcome to Simon. And I'm so proud that Simon is 25th on the best business schools on the Bloomberg Business Week list. That is incredible, especially for diversity. And just a brief introduction for myself. I began my board journey when I was appointed to the board of the Linux Foundation in 2016, and then became chair of the board in 2019. And I tell you what, I realized that more women and more diversity needs to be in the boards. And so I've been pursuing my board journey since those days. And I'm so proud to welcome Betsy Berkhemer-Credaire, who is the CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards, and also Dorothy Coleman, who is not only a sponsor of the Simon Women's Alliance, but also a graduate of a Simon Business School and a board member, and has done a number of things in her board journey. So let me ask Betsy and Dorothy to please introduce themselves and say a few introductory remarks, and then we'll go to Q&A that I've prepared. Betsy.
Dorothy. All right, we're about the same area in the alphabet, so we'll just jump right in. I thank you, Nithya, for inviting us. This is going to be a great program this afternoon, and hope all of your audience will be forging ahead to find their pathways to serve on corporate boards in the near term or the far term. This is our goal, and this is what we are, the impact that we're making. I'm CEO of 50/50 Women on Boards, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're focused on research, tracking the numbers of women on the Russell 3000 company boards throughout the US. And I also own a retained executive search firm in Los Angeles, which is Clayton, for the last 27 years. And I've been a business owner for a long time. And by the way, business owners in this audience should be encouraged, because business owners are CEOs and good candidates for corporate boards. I've also served on many large nonprofit boards, and I'm the author of the famous books called Winning the Board Game and The Board Game, How Smart Women Become Corporate Directors. So these are the Bibles of how to get oneself on corporate boards. And we can talk about that shortly, but delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy, and thank you, Betsy and Dorothy. I would love to hear about your board journey and introduction to boards.
Good evening, and hola from Puerto Rico, which is where I'm at. If you see me a little distracted, I have two devices. I have a backup device just in case my internet's not good here. But I'm Dorothy Coleman, and I'm the CFO for government business for Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. I am here in Puerto Rico where we acquired a company a couple of months ago and are working with the Puerto Rican government to improve healthcare on the island here. So very excited to be on the island this week, along with be with you ladies tonight on this a very, very important topic. I think as we talk through this, I'll share my board experience, but definitely have sat on not-for-profit boards. And that's really kind of where I started my journey. We're going to talk more about that. And then I've all the way up to setting on a startup company that we took a IPO and now is publicly traded. And that was a wonderful experience. And we'll talk about, what's the difference between that and not-for-profit. But at the end of the day, I think this is such an important topic because diversity in a board environment is crucial. And sitting in the boardroom, both as a board member and an officer of a company, I can tell you that it makes a difference. And women need more presence, and we on boards, both publicly traded and private and not-for-profit, along with greater diversity that represents the customers in which these companies serve. So really excited to partner with Betsy tonight, and always love being with Simon.
Thank you, Dorothy. And I'm so glad you could make it from Puerto Rico. So one of the first questions I wanted to really double click on is, what you alluded to, Dorothy, which is how did you get started on your board journey? I think you mentioned nonprofits, and then how did that lead to your first commercial board seat? And was there a connection between the two? And what mattered in your procuring that board seat?
Yeah, and I didn't set off on a journey, long time ago, several decades ago, to be where I'm at today, but I'm very blessed for what has happened in my life. I will tell you my first experience with board was in not-for-profit with United Way. And that was actually beginning as a volunteer in a subcommittee, not even a committee of the board or on the board, but as a subcommittee in a work group working on something very specific to what the board wanted to do some research on. And so I'm volunteering in that, and then working my way through that to being on subcommittees, and then eventually earning a seat at the table at the board. And then I've sat on several boards, not for profit, but by far United Way has been one that I've been with in several states. I think it's 5 states and 5 different board experiences. And let me tell you, they're all different. We're going to talk about how that works in that environment. But also having the pleasure to be the vice chair of the YWCA in Rochester, which was a great experience. So it starts with something I didn't have in the beginning, which I would encourage women to do, is have a plan. Have a plan, have these type of discussions up front, and understand where your passion is, where you want to go, and then map out a plan. And we're going to talk about some other resources for you tonight too. But that's my journey. And today, I think I've shared with folks before, it's not a secret. When I actually do retire, which everybody keeps asking me when I'm going to retire, my goal is to continue to participate on boards and continue to make a difference as a female board member.
Exactly. And I think a lot of us are calling it phase 3 of our careers, when, post-corporate into actually governance and sitting on boards. And Betsy has moved mountains and advocated for diversity on boards. And so I was curious, Betsy, how did you get started, and what prompted you to go fight for this cause and make a difference in California and then, of course, the world?
Moving mountains, that is true, Nithya. Thank you. It feels like it. I'm trying to remain young, but time just keeps going by. But I mentioned that I own a retained executive search firm, and it was about 25 years ago that I started to notice here in Southern California that, gee, there weren't very many women on corporate boards, like a handful. And so that's what sparked my curiosity initially. I had already been serving on nonprofit boards myself, and I wasn't so much looking for a corporate board myself, but more to counsel women and really to handle board searches to help companies find qualified women outside their own networks. So that's what prompted it. I brought together a group of women here in Southern California, 5 of them initially, who did serve on public company boards owned by shareholders and listed on New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. And they looked around the room. They didn't know one another before, most of them. And then we started to add to the group and bring in more corporate directors, but they were few and far between. And that's why the group called Women Corporate Directors got started. And ironically, at the same time, in New York and in Chicago, there were similar groups coming together of women corporate directors and looking around and saying, how come there aren't more of us, right? How are we going to change this picture? And then I started the Southern California chapter, therefore, of Women Corporate Directors, and that then evolved to become larger. And I got involved with legislative efforts to early on in 2012 to try and urge the legislature of California to consider a potential law, which took us 7 years to get passed. And I'll tell you more about that. But you talk about moving mountains, that was the mountain. It was very difficult. It was not an overnight miracle. There was a lot of opposition, still is, but the law is the law. And the goal is at the end of this year, there will be 3 women on every public company board in the state of California, which in 2019 meant 200 women were added to boards. And by the end of this year, another 535 women will be added to boards in California. So it's pretty momentous. And like Dorothy said, companies are more profitable when women are on the boards. And even the guys we all know chuckle about this and say, yeah, when the women get on the boards, the conversation changes. Women really, in nonprofit boards as well, but it's no longer just the guys talking to one another and having more of a very relaxed, very informal, not very maybe business oriented. I don't mean that because they do run the businesses. But when the women are in the room of any group, the conversation changes. And that's why companies are more profitable when they have a minimum of 3 women on the boards. And this is an exciting moment, and that not only is California leading in this effort, but the ripple effect for the impression throughout the country. Corporate boards can no longer face the optics, let alone the shareholder pressure of having an all-white, old white guys board. If you don't have women and individuals from underrepresented communities, you're just not an enlightened company. And why would shareholders want to invest in you? And that's also reinforced by NASDAQ recent rulings and by Goldman Sachs and by BlackRock and the big institutional investors, CalPERS, CalSTRS, everybody, New York State Pension Fund, et cetera, say putting women on the boards is good business, really, and profitable. So that's what the ripple effect has been across the country. Anyway, I'm just pleased to share this journey with your alumni from Simon, because every one of you is qualified at a certain point in your career to be on corporate boards. So what we try to do at 50/50 Women on Boards is debunk the myths and open up the channels so that you know what you can accomplish. And so let me stop there and go on to other questions. Otherwise, I'll just, you gotta get the hook and stop me from talking. I'm sorry.
Yes, indeed. And it's very interesting that 50/50 Women on Boards was not always called 50/50 Women on Boards. Could you quickly share what it was called originally and why 50/50 now?
Well, 2010 is when the original co-founders, who are still on the board, Mally Giro and Stephanie Sonnabend, both from Boston at the time, also were thinking, hey, where are all the women on the boards, and why don't we start keeping track so that the public and the business community, let alone all the women and the shareholders, know what the situation is. So they started the research project way back then, 2010, with the goal and the name that all corporate boards should have at least 20% of their board seats held by women by the year 2020. And this was accomplished not all corporate boards, but at least of all the public company board seats in the Russell 3000, 20% are now held by women. Some have fewer, some have more, but it's a significant progress because back in 2010 in the Russell 3000, only 10% of the board seats were held by women. So it was a good name to hang our hat on at the time, 2020 women on boards, and we did accomplish that goal. But at the end of 2020, which was the 10th anniversary, it was obviously time to, thank goodness 2020, the year is over anyway, for all that we've been through. But it was time to transform the brand and have a new mission. And we did a lot of thinking about this, brainstorming, focus groups, corporate sponsors whom we depend upon, weighing in to say, yeah, we're going to go for it. 50-50 women on boards, meaning 50% women, 50% men on all corporate boards is what our goal is. And I'm really pleased to tell you that in the most recent research, we used to do it annually because that's all we could afford to do. Now we do it quarterly. And the most recent research is 25.6% nationwide of the all Russell 3000 corporate board seats are held by women. Now, this is much bigger than the Fortune 500, much bigger than the Fortune 1000, because they all count the number of companies in their sample. And so it's of 3,000 companies, we've made it to 25.6%. And in California, because of the law already, we've made it to 29%, which is higher than it's ever been. And the national number is higher than it's ever been. So, but we're still a long way from 50-50, aren't we? So we got work to do, and we have a lot of work to do related to people of underrepresented communities, women of underrepresented communities, because we also add in our mission and what the impact we're trying to make is that women of color will occupy 20% of all board seats in the Russell 3000 also when we're getting to 50-50. So it's pretty proactive and you might say aggressive, but if we don't put it out there, it just isn't going to happen. And nothing happens naturally, unfortunately, when it comes to making history. So that's how it all came about. And I've been the CEO just for 3 years, and I still have my other business. Fortunately, runs very well by itself because I'm very passionate about 50-50 women on boards. And we also put on a lot of events that I'll tell you about, workshops. And then we have our big conversation on board diversity in Indianapolis and New York and Chicago and Dallas and Los Angeles, Seattle, and 30 cities, all in November and all coming up, including the Carolinas, where Nithya is involved on the leadership committee and very much a cheerleader for the whole effort there. So I hope that covers it for the moment.
No, it's very, very important to know that there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of advocacy, there's a lot of preparation going on, in terms of getting board seats. I myself took classes through 50-50 Women on Boards on how to get a board seat. But let me turn to some practical things like how does board recruitment work? And Dorothy, I was curious about how you procured your commercial board seat, or how did it come about? How much did your nonprofit experience help you, or was your networking in the nonprofit, helpful towards the board seat? And then Betsy, I'll be asking you, how do people contact you as an executive retained firm in the board level, and how do you help in that search? But Dorothy, very interesting. I love what you did.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. As I said earlier, creating that plan, one of the areas that I actually was surprised when it actually happened, came to fruition, is how strong your network is and how many people advocate in your network for you. So obviously I've been in healthcare my entire career. If you look at me on LinkedIn, I've got like, I don't know, last I count was over 500 connections. And it really started that way. Somebody who knew somebody knew me. So somebody called the board, the company founder and the board chair at the time called someone who knew me and said, hey, the Dorothy came across LinkedIn, by the way, is how he found me. And do you know her? And he was like, oh my gosh, I do know her. Tell me about the company. Tell me what you're looking for. And by the way, she's female, but she's also finance and has a CPA. So that was another, added strength that I brought to the board. And then, so it started with a conversation. And honestly, I was just having a conversation yesterday in my network about a board seat at the National Boys and Girls Club of America, the national board. And it was just somebody would say something. I go, I know somebody who's on that board. I mean, let me try to make the connection because somebody was interested in it. So the network is phenomenal. And so I think it's very important to think, broad and have advocates that, tell people what you want, figure out what kind of board you want to be on, where your passion lies. And I'm a true believer, the passion matters because board work is hard work, as the board members will say. And we can talk a little bit more about that, but passion is very important. So do what you care about. But it really is that network, and then getting yourself prepared. I mean, like you said, taking a class, making sure that you're ready and exposed, because one of the most important things you can learn as you grow is the governance model. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it really is, you learn as you go and develop, but the network is probably and recruitment are the two tools I think are the greatest tools to get you where you want to go.
Absolutely. The importance of the network, the importance of them knowing that you are looking for a board seat and the kind of boards you want to serve on. And your passion demonstrates, the quality of your work. And so people are willing to advocate for you. Betsy, board searches are quite different, aren't they? I mean, it's not that they put it out there and people apply and so on and so forth. So how does it work?
Well, building upon what Dorothy said, it is the getting on corporate boards, women and men in this audience, is all about your networks and not about search firms. So, and this is what we also educate in our workshops, to say how to network like Dorothy did, when you don't even sometimes know that those individuals are impressed by you and they're talking about you. But this is the basic premise, everybody. Boards are built on relationships of trust. So traditionally, the men, because they were the only ones on boards, would bring on other men, buddies they knew through their business schools or their golf country clubs or their business experience, but people in their own individual networks. And so it was really comfortable. And in many cases, and this is what the men do so well that we women just haven't figured out yet, in many cases, those guys are lined up 6 deep behind Joe Smith, who serves on a board. And they say, Joe, when you retire, and they're playing golf with him every week, and say, when you retire from that board, think of me, I'm your replacement. And why? Because it's money. It is money that you are paid. It is also the being in the elite of business when you serve on boards. And it is the fun of managing the growth and vision and operations, not day to day, but overall vision and strategy for companies. It's fun. And it also makes very well-rounded executives, which all women tell me that they become much better, well-rounded, better and more well-rounded executives by serving on boards. And they also convince their CEOs about this by saying to the CEO, look, I'll be bringing back best practices to our company that I learned when I'm out serving on the corporate boards, which is true. And it's the same thing the men have done for years, bring back best practices. They have a different technology system over there than we do. Why don't we try that? Take a look at it. And it just builds upon itself. So boards are built on relationships of trust is the bottom line. Therefore, the networks of individuals who already serve on those boards is the number one way to get onto a board. And what happens with the search firms, to why search firms are not the answer. What happens with search firms is even though the corporation hires a search firm to handle a board search. By the way, only 40% of board searches are handled by search firms. Everything else is just internal to the board and the nominating and governance committee, and the CEO has a lot of power over who's selected on the board. So what happens is the board puts together a list of people they already know and trust from their networks. Sometimes we're lucky and women are included, or persons of color, or persons of underrepresented communities. Very unlikely. And therefore, the list is then given to the search firm. And I don't care if the search firm is Korn Ferry or Heidrick and Struggles big or small boutiques like we are. The list is given to the search firms and they want you to vet these candidates, the candidates they already know, because they really don't know the background other than a quick Google search. That's not it. But investigating the boards that that person has served, nonprofit as well as for-profit, what happened on those boards? Did the company go bankrupt? Did it grow? Were there mergers and acquisitions? Were there a lot of litigations? And what type of board member was that board member on the board of that company? And they want the search firms to be part of that vetting is calling other board members to find out what kind of board member that person is. Quiet, wallflower, or very active, very knowledgeable and very strategic and thoughtful, not just talking a lot, but strategic and thoughtful about what they do. So that's what the search firms do, is vet those candidates. Of course, all search firms ask the client, the corporate board, gee, may we also bring forward potential candidates who meet your qualifications? Yes, the board is looking for certain additional experience that might not be already on the board. So they always say yes, yes, you can bring us people from underrepresented communities or women. But if they aren't already known to somebody on the board, they have very little chance, no matter how qualified. So we're giving you the inside scoop, everybody. There's no reason to call up unless you know somebody very well at a search firm, because they can't do anything for you. Search firms are hired to vet the candidates that are already known, and if they are bringing forward women or people of color, they're finding those candidates based on who knows whom, and could be also endorsed by a friend of somebody on the board. So that's how it works. You can't apply for a board position. So how do you find board positions? Mainly in your industry. You also ask your network, and we're going to talk about how to do that. You ask them what boards that they might know about, and you also check our 50/50 WOB website for research and directory, because we keep track of, and the latest statistics are there for June 30th, 2021. We keep track of and we rank companies according to how many women they have on boards. So the goal is 50/50, obviously, and those boards aren't going to look for any more women right now, so don't worry about reaching out to them. 3+ is also an award winner, if you will, meaning at least 3 women on their board. But those that only have 2 or 1, or there are a few left, not in California, but in other states that have no women on the board. So those are the ones you want to target. And you'll want to start asking your network, gee, XYZ company only has 2 women on their boards. I'm really looking to be on a board. And Joe, do you happen to know so-and-so I know you went to college together. I mean, you all of you women in the audience, you got to do your own research. Men do this research to the nth degree, and we're just figuring it out. So you need to find out what boards you might be interested in. Like Dorothy said, what you might be passionate about. None of us are going to be on Starbucks board or, the big companies, General Motors or American Airlines, but there are thousands of public companies that are even smaller than the Russell 3000 and that you'll be able to pursue and look at. So starting with your industry, your state, your city, look at your business journal list of potential, of public companies in your city, and figure out who might not. In every website of every company has their board of directors on their website. You have to look for it. It's under investor relations or it's under corporate governance. Doesn't necessarily say board of directors like that, because people don't necessarily want some want people to know who's on their board, some don't. But anyway, that's how you find them. So let me stop talking, please, and turn over to Dorothy to fill in the gaps on the networking as well, because it is so critically important.
Yes, I think both of you have mentioned the importance of networking and also making it known that you are interested in a board seat and the kind of board seat you'd want or the kind of value you could bring to the board. But I wanted to also ask both of you about tips on preparing to be a board member. I think Dorothy mentioned how valuable it was, being on nonprofit boards and learning how boards function, and different boards have different functionality. And then there are also schools, right? You can take classes with 50-50 women on boards. NACD has classes. And one of our attendees asked the question, do you recommend being a part of paid organizations such as NACD, which brings a number of services to help with board, preparation? I think all of those are valuable. So Dorothy, I was curious as to how your nonprofit experience helped you be a better board member.
Yeah, it really did. And I would encourage, to do the dual track, do both. But I would say for the nonprofit, for me, which mostly were community-based organizations, whether it be United Way or YWCA, or even like a teen center that I co-founded and became a board member. It really started, what that did for me is I learned governance. And there are great books to read, but there's nothing like real life experience. And you can see how boards can function in a good way for the organization. And then you can also see committees and boards, how they are dysfunctional. And I think that is, for me at least, I've observed more prevalence, and it happens more in the local community boards than it would in public companies. But having said that, it's great experience. And it allows you to sit on different committees. So I would rotate, and usually audit and governance are the hardest committees to get on, has been in my experience. So start somewhere else, but if you've got that background, maybe they can use you. But usually working in like membership or community growth and revenue, those type of things are great committees to start on, and then just learn how the board, and watch and learn. I think the other thing too is, in preparing for it, what I would say is like Betsy nailed it, do your homework, because the men do it. Understand what the strategy is, what's a mission, what's a vision, what has been the 10-year history, how have they performed, how much turnover they've had in leadership and in the board members. Do it like you're going to do a job interview, like you're going to go as passionately for your next career move as you would for a board position, because you really want to know what you're getting into. One time, I'll tell you just a quick story. After going through some good, it ended up being good, but during the time it was dysfunctional and hard experiences as a board member, I decided that I was going to sit in on a board meeting, and these were United Way organizations. I wanted to sit in on their board meeting as an observer before I would join the board. Why did I do that? Because the board compilation and the board diversity mattered. And it mattered to me, and it mattered to the organization. And to watch a board meeting, not going to get away with doing that all the time, but if you have the opportunity to do it, you can really see the dynamics of the board and how they're performing. But do your homework. Treat it like it is your next career move, because it's very important that, as Betsy said, you can get into, she said the word bankruptcy. If you are on a board that is financial distress, that does carry with you as a board member going forward. It's not a permanent black eye, but it does, how you get them out of the distress, it, is also how you improve it. But be very, very careful, but be also very specific and well educated about the organization you're considering.
You bring up such a good point, Dorothy. In fact, one of the attendees submitted a question saying, how do you do your research on the company to see if they're financially healthy, and joining the board would be a good move? And clearly, one needs to do it.
Yeah, and I would say all organizations, not for profit, United Way, your community-based organizations, all produce financial statements. Get a hold of them. Their earnings reports, publicly traded companies, regulated companies, even if they're not publicly traded, have to have earnings reports. So get a hold of them. And sometimes it's harder. You got to go digging sometimes. Sometimes it's real easy and it's available. And sometimes you got to go digging. You can also call them. One of the things I did is I just called the company and said, hey, I'm interested in your organization in many ways, not only from a philanthropic perspective, but also from I want to be active. Can you send me your report? And they do. They all have the 990s. You can get a lot of information that's available now, especially now that we have Google, and you can find it a lot easier. That's how you're going to get a hold of the financials. And then also talk to people in your community about the boards. What do they think? Is it, what's the perception of the board in the community?
No, that's good. And I would also add about, it is true that if a company goes through a bad time, that it does sort of fall onto the reputation of the board members themselves individually. But you in the audience don't have to worry about carrying any financial liability unless you did something egregious that the board agreed upon, and the company did illegal things like Enron, which is why that big company fell so quickly. But there's this thing called directors and officers insurance, D&O insurance. You've all heard about that. And that protects the board members and the officers of the company, as long as you're just being a diligent board member and you're not doing something wrong. So you don't have to worry about the financial risks. And in my books, the total of the two of them, I've interviewed about 115 women board members currently serving on boards about how they got on their boards. And I was astounded to find out that 85% of them, just like Dorothy and like most, 85% of them were recommended for their first corporate board by someone they knew on their nonprofit boards. And when I found that out from the research, I started asking why. And the reason is that because when there's a succession planning upcoming inside the boardroom, and the guys are sitting around the table, whether it's the nominating committee or the whole board, saying, look, we've got an opening because Joe's going to be retiring in a year. The generally accepted step down age is 75, even though a lot of the guys don't want to leave. It used to be 72, but the guys got close and they moved up to 75. Some want to move it to 80. But shareholders are not putting up with that. And activist shareholders are not putting up with that. So 75 is generally accepted. So you know pretty much when Joe's going to be stepping down. And so they look around the room and say, well, we got to get a woman on this board because this doesn't look good. They don't say because we'll be more profitable, let me tell you. They say this just doesn't look good. So they say, well, who knows one? That's the question. Who knows one who can fit into our environment and bring the skills and experience we're looking for? And frankly, it also said to me once, and doesn't talk too much. And I said, are you kidding? And they said, well, we need to have people who are focused on the issues and not talking too much. And that happened publicly with it was the Uber board, I think it was, not too many years ago, if you recall. One guy said, well, why should we bring on another woman? They just talk too much. Well, I guess we women are known for that, but it's best if we just focus on the issues and not distract the guys, I guess. But the point is, 85% of the women were recommended by people they knew and had seen them in action on their boards. And around the room, the guys say, well, look, my wife is an outstanding executive, but she can't serve on this board where I am. My C-suite women are outstanding. They can't serve on the board where I am. So the only women they've seen in action, in many cases, are those that they've known on their nonprofit boards. So all of you can get on nonprofit boards. You can also get on advisory boards for corporations, be on the diversity advisory board if one exists, and get on a commission, politically appointed. You don't have to be a contributor to a politician to be appointed. You just simply have to look at the city, county, or state websites as to what commission appointments might be open. And a friend of mine in one of the books did that and got on the Parks and Recreation Commission. I love the story because it was long before the TV show, and it was kind of the lowest on the commission totem pole. And she did very well, and pretty soon the mayor put her on the police commission, and which was a lot of media exposure. And when she stepped down from that, she had she had a choice of what corporate board she wanted to sit on. So visibility, women, and in being seen and doing a good job where you are, and doing a good job on your nonprofit boards is just very, very critical to people remember you. They'll remember to mention you if there's a board search that they hear about. And just like Dorothy said, you don't know who's talking to whom, but you make an impression no matter what you're doing when you're on those boards.
Very well said, because a lot of board members who make the decisions on the skills matrix and who to bring into the board also happen to sit on nonprofit boards, and they observe, people who are doing well and bring them into this list. I've also been told that professional, services organizations like audit companies or legal firms that serve the board are often asked, can you make recommendations on, women or underrepresented that can serve on the board. So
Right.
it's important to express that you are interested, you are qualified, so that people will remember you when the list making happens.
And your own banker, by the way, your own attorney, and
Yes.
your own CPA, definitely, Nithya, you hit that right on the most important point, that your own networks close to you that you might not even think hear about board opportunities. Let them know of your intention to serve on a corporate board.
It's absolutely. So one of our attendees, Aditi, asks, what recommendation do you have for women professionals working in mid-senior level positions, still finding or developing the industry or functional expertise and aspire to be a board member in the future? And Dorothy, I was thinking we have an excellent class in 50/50 Women on Boards that really serves, those who are just starting to explore board functions. Could you speak more to that and what one could do in mid-career?
Are you asking me about the workshop, Nithya?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, the workshop is called Get On Board Workshop, and it's on our website, 5050wob.com. And exactly that, we focus on 4 things. We focus on how to talk about yourself in board speak, if the way board members talk to one another, and focus on your experience that is really valuable to boards in very succinct 3 bullets that you can remember for cocktail parties and business meetings. That's first, your high impact sound bites. The second is your board profile, which is really not a regular resume, but sort of a reverse of the resume, and only 2 pages. And at the top, you would have what particular value-added experience you have that you would bring to boards. And then the third is your LinkedIn profile. And I was glad to hear Dorothy say, I didn't realize that they found you on LinkedIn. They probably heard about you, and then they looked at your LinkedIn profile. And so we help, we don't write those because every person should write her own. But you can use keywords like seeking corporate board position or audit committee experience for nonprofits, and things that are logical that might show up in when a CEO or nominating governance committee is just surfing the web and or surfing LinkedIn looking for potential candidates, especially women or persons of color. And then the fourth and final thing is this networking strategy we're talking about. And just identify, you don't have to identify a lot of people, just 15 to 20 to 25 people who know somebody who serves on a corporate board or is a corporate board member or your own executives in your company, and you start talking to them. You don't ask for help. You know, never be a woman asking for help, but you simply say, gee, I intend to serve on a corporate board someday or soon or next year. And I know you serve on boards, Joe, and I would welcome your advice. Men love to give advice. And so anyway, you have many other questions
Yes.
we need to focus on.
So another question from an audience member is, what is the average time commitment associated with being on a board? I'm sure it varies, but wondering if there's an average number of hours per week or month. And I think it's a good question, because if you are an operator and still working in a very busy executive role, can you take on a board? Do you have enough time to take on a board? So what is the average amount of time, Dorothy, that one would spend on a board role?
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, it depends on the board, right? What company? And this is why I love the local community agencies and local community not-for-profits. I mean, you can even do regional and national. Like I said, on the National Healthcare Financial Management Association, and that was 4 times a year. And it ended up being more time than I originally thought it was going to be. So be careful when you get into those bigger boards. But your local community, you have, maybe 6 board meetings a year at most. I mean, if it's more than 6, I'd scratch my head and say, why does the board need to meet so much? That should tell you something. But if you're, anywhere from 4 to 6 times a year, and then if you have, and those are usually, I would say, I don't know, depending on what's going on, maybe 2 hours prep and 2 hours meeting. And then if you're on a committee, it's usually an hour and then, an hour prep. 3 to 4 times a year. So depending on if you're going to be on a committee, some boards require you to be on a committee if you're going to be on the board, especially in the not-for-profit, the local communities. But that's why I like starting there, because especially if you just start on a committee, because then that's manageable if you're, in that beginning phase. When you get into the publicly traded, and again, for me, it was extremely intense because we were a startup that went through an IPO, and that was extensive, especially if you're on the audit committee. Extensive time, great experience. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but I was burning the midnight oil a lot on that one, but a very good experience. So you got to figure out what you can do. Don't get over committed. I would say, make sure you're managing, and you can always add. It's hard to retract. So, if you take it step by step, and if you have the capacity, let time settle in. If you have the capacity, you can always add.
I mean, I think to the question from the mid-career woman before, start with committees when you are just exploring board service, and see if board service is really for you and you have passion around it, and then move up to, broader and broader roles, right? And then go through some training and things of that nature. And you brought up a really good point. I mean, in times of IPO or crisis, for example, during the COVID-19 crisis, a lot of companies were meeting almost monthly. So it really depends upon whether the company is in a steady state or if it's not, as to how much time it would take. There's one more question, a bunch of other questions, which is, it's been believed that board members have to be individuals from the C-suite, which is a very limited pool. How would you share your thoughts on, if you're not a C-suite person, can you still make it to the board? And I remember this, I mean, in the old days, CEOs appointed CEOs to be on the board. And then it broadened a little bit to CFOs maybe, and now it's really much broader.
It is. If I could jump in there, that what we're seeing at 50-50 women on boards, as well as in the search business, that boards are looking for the kinds of technology, wisdom and experience that they've never had on the boards before. Not to manage those functions, but to know what to look for, to know how to guide strategy. And those functions would include, logically, cybersecurity and social digital marketing, which boards have never really spent that much time on. And a lot of those old time board members still have their secretaries print their emails to be read, and rather than be looking at their, smartphones. At any rate, another big category now is CHROs, Chief Human Resources Officers, and in some cases, Chief Diversity Officers. And they do have the C-suite title, the chief in their title, which is a good thing. And so thinking about how in your career you're going to work up to that Chief Technology Officer, Chief Information Officer, Chief Financial Officer like Dorothy. And but it's not exclusive. Those who are digital marketing experts, digital natives, digital experts who have business experience. Yes, younger women and men are getting on boards, but they still have to have really solid related business experience. Otherwise, why would business leaders want you on the board if you don't know much about business yet? So plan on, as you would, because you went to Simon Business School, so you know a lot about business, and all of you are knowledgeable in this audience. But for the general population, it may not be for them. But that's what boards are looking for now: technology, cybersecurity, human resources, and digital. So,
absolutely, that's an area where boards are looking to kind of build up their skill sets, and there are a lot of young people with digital skill sets. There are two questions with regards to nonprofit boards, and so I'm going to kind of pair them together. One is, the person asks, I overheard a board member telling someone who is interested in being a nonprofit board member that it would cost a donation of $50,000. So you have to make a donation in order to get a board seat. Dorothy, have you come across that? And is that normal practice?
I have. Yeah, I have. And there are what we call the pay to play boards. But typically what those pay to play are usually C-suite positions that they're looking for in the community to guide the community development. And they're looking to fund, the organization. So it's pay to play. I've experienced that. But typically, honestly, I haven't seen that in a while now, for about, 5 to 10 years. I think let me back up. There's always going to be the pay to play, which means your company or your company is going to have to put money in to get a board seat. I find, though, while that's true, and you can always advocate within your company, hey, I'll take that board seat, because you'd be surprised how many of us don't want to be on those kind of boards. So we're always looking for somebody to take the board seat in a company, because it's a pay to play. So you're there to pay, it's not as impactful, but important work gets done. So the other thing I would say, though, is I think the other point of this, not 50,000, but you should do a financial donation. And if you're working, this is my own personal opinion, you should give your time, talent, and treasures. And I say the treasures needs to be what is commensurate with what you can do. And people are at different points in their life, what they can afford. If it's $100, if it's $1,000, whatever the number is, have a conversation. When you go to interview, ask them. They will tell you, actually. But if they don't, ask them. And then if you're really, really, and I've done this for board prospects, if they're really matching what you want and you're interested in them and they're interested in you, you can negotiate and work your way, because we all have financial commitments and whatnot, especially early in the career. At least have the conversation. But sometimes in the not-for-profit, for me, that's just my personal belief. I believe you should make some type of financial commitment, even if it's small.
It shows that you care.
Agreed, and it's how nonprofits survive. And but it doesn't have to be 50,000. It could be, like Dorothy said, it could be 5,000, it could be 2,500, and have the conversation. And sometimes your company will match, or whatever you can contribute, or the whole contribution is from your company, or the whole contribution is like a United Way, where you are out fundraising, which is very good practice, by the way. You're out fundraising with other companies to bring in funds, and that counts. Whatever you can bring in definitely counts. And the reason that's important is because you're making contacts. You're making high level contacts as you're doing board work, nonprofit board work, and as you're reaching out. And I think on that subject of money, Nithya, if I might, why don't I give a little bit of what public boards pay? And so it's kind of, a lot of people think it's a big secret, but it's on everybody's website, what they, in their annual reports, what they pay their board members, you can easily find out. But the average really is about $100,000 a year for the meetings. And they're not only buying your time and expertise in meetings, but also your mindset. I mean, when you serve on a nonprofit board or a corporate board, you're thinking about them all the time. You're thinking about the products. You're going to the stores. You're alert to what's happening with that company. So you're really spending time thinking about it as well as actually in meetings. But those everybody, men and women, nobody's paid more, nobody's paid less. Every board director is paid the same basic compensation. However, if you chair audit committee, or if you are the lead independent director, which is the spokesperson for the people who are not related to the company, or if you're on the other special committees, you get paid additional money for that. So think about it as at $80,000 to $100,000 in medium range companies. The big companies, the Fortune 1000 that none of us are ever going to be on, they'll pay $250,000 a year, but we have to be realistic. Even a private company will pay you $50,000 a year. So this is thinking about when you get on a board before you retire, but then thinking about, working your magic and your networking techniques to get yourself on 3 boards after you retire. So it's a nice way to make money.
Yeah, exactly. This has been a fantastic conversation. We have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to punt to Latanya Johns and ask her to please close us out, and we'll see you in the other webinar.
Thank you so much, Nithya. Wow, all I have to say is wow, what a great discussion. I love the practical tips and the step-by-step action items that were recommended. First, I just want to thank all of our audience members for joining and the great questions that you submitted. And I'd like to especially thank Nithya Ruff for being our moderator, and our speakers, Dorothy Coleman and Betsy Berkhemer-Credaire. So sorry. Dorothy and Betsy, your experiences and journeys are such an inspiration to women. I know I'm inspired after this discussion. Thank you so much for giving us the inside scoop. I feel like we were in a boardroom getting some information that we're not supposed to have, but we can use so that we can move forward in our careers. So thank you so much. As we wrap up this evening, I want to remind those of you that are attending the Simon Women's Alliance networking session to be sure and log off of this webinar and join the networking session Zoom meeting. You should have received that link. So again, thank you, Nithya. Thank you, Dorothy, Betsy. This was amazing. And also a big thanks to all of those who made this event possible. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening.
Thank you.